Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. City Club is where civic-minded people come together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live, work, and play. I'm Greg McPherson, president of City Club. Members and guests are gathered today at the Sentinel Hotel, along with all of you listening or watching on OPB Radio, Portland Community Media, or YouTube. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners enables us to put on the state's best civic programs week after week. Our media partner is Oregon Business Magazine. Our current Friday Forum sponsors are AARP of Oregon, McKinley Irvin, Iberdrola Renewables, Airbnb, and Uber. I will also mention Social Venture Partners, which teamed up with sponsor AARP to bring us today's program. Please join me in showing our appreciation for all of them. Please join us for our next Friday Forum on January 8 for The Threat of Islamophobia, when we discuss how international conflict and national rhetoric impact Portland. We will hear from representatives from our local Muslim communities. You can learn more about City Club events, purchase tickets, and become a member on our website, pdxcityclub.org. And now for today's program. Wikipedia defines an encore career as work in the second half of life that combines continued income, greater personal meaning, and social impact. Today's lead speaker and moderator, Marc Freedman, coined the phrase encore career when he was still in his 30s. These days, he calls himself a social entrepreneur. Others have called him a visionary. While many see our aging society as a problem, his organization's website declares, we view it as a solution. Our ultimate goal is to create a better future for young people and future generations. I am pleased to welcome founder and CEO of Encore.org, Marc Freedman, as today's moderator. An award-winning social innovator, thought leader, and author, Marc is one of the nation's leading experts on the longevity revolution and transformation of retirement. With him are three Oregonians with experience in different aspects of this growing trend. Ken Harris, an attorney and Portland Encore Fellow with Social Venture Partners, Dorinda Schubert, Executive Director of Bridge Meadows, and Rick Henderson, Head of Intel's Encore Career Fellowship Program. Marc Freedman will introduce these other speakers more fully. A visiting scholar at Stanford University, Freedman is a member of the Wall Street Journal's experts panel and is a frequent contributor to the Harvard Business Review. Freedman played a central role in establishing AARP Experience Corps, mobilizing people over 50 to improve the school performance of low-income elementary school students in 22 U.S. cities. Additionally, he spearheaded the creation of the Encore Fellows, a one-year fellowship program that you will learn more about shortly. Please join me in welcoming today's guests.
Thank you, President McPherson. It's such an honor to be here at the City Club with this wonderful panel and to talk about the longevity revolution that you just mentioned. I spent a lot of time thinking about that revolution over the past few years because I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. My office is in San Francisco. My home is in Berkeley. And as some of you may know, we have very bad traffic in San Francisco. And I go over the Bay Bridge every day. And it seemed like invariably I'd be stopped for about half an hour right in front of a billboard from a financial services company, which pronounced, the first person to live to 150 has already been born. And the punchline is prepare for a longer retirement. And I know that billboard was supposed to be it's supposed to scare people about their nest eggs. It scared me thinking about what it would be like to spend a period in retirement that was equivalent to today's life expectancies, or at least the life expectancies of the past generation, and what it would be like to live in a society which put at least a quarter, maybe more of its population out to pasture for such a sustained period of time. It's a dystopian vision to think about that, a sort of scenario planning through the rearview mirror, looking at these 21st century demographics, 21st century longevity, but with the lifestyle of of the past. Fortunately, we're not confined to that prospect. There's a science fiction writer named William Gibson who says the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. And that future is already here, it's alive and well here in Portland and in Oregon, and it's a future of people who include those who are in their Encore careers. We describe Encore career as the second act for the greater good, and one that's at the intersection of passion, purpose, and a paycheck. It's a little risky to say those three words while talking into a microphone, but already 4.5 million Americans have moved into these second acts. It's not just Bill Gates and Mayor Bloomberg and Jimmy Carter, who's still doing it at 90, even facing cancer, but 4.5 million ordinary people all across the country. And what's just as exciting is that in research that we did last year, 21 million more say it's a top priority to follow in their footsteps. And these second acts last an average of about a decade. So I'm not a math whiz, but I think if you put all those numbers together, you get 250 million years of human and social capital that could be applied to some of the most pressing problems facing the nation and younger generations. That's not just a glancing contribution, that's a human capital revolution that's really akin only to the movement of so many millions of women into new roles a generation ago. And those of you who went through that will remember there's a lot of hand-wringing then about all these people, all these women who were going to displace men, it was going to be a source of conflict, and we were going to get to the same place as we started, only with a lot of strife along the way. Now we look back a half a century later and we know that there's no way we'd be competitive as a country without that extraordinary pool of talent. And I think 50 years from now we'll think the same way about this group of people who are in Encore careers and others who are continuing to contribute in ways that not only provide personal meaning but mean something beyond themselves and contribute to what might be called an experience dividend. All of these benefits of longevity, of life lived, put back into society in ways that are enriching for individuals and for communities. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we realize the experience dividend? Before I go into the second part and look at that question, I wanted to do two things. The first is to say that for those of you who have just tuned in on OPB, I'm Marc Freedman from Encore.org, and I'm here with Ken Harris, Dorinda Schubert, and Rick Henderson at the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. And I talked about the future that's already here. I'd like to ask 3 Encore Fellows who are part of Social Venture Partners' Encore Fellowships program in the audience today, if they would stand and just talk briefly about the work that they're involved in.
Hi, I'm Dan Farbach, and I'm an Encore Fellow at Jesse F. Richardson Foundation. This foundation focuses on services for seniors, including programs in Central America. My task is to bring some discipline, or maybe the actual lack of discipline that came from my previous career, which was an entrepreneurial career in publishing in New York. So I think they're looking to me to help them find ways to make some money.
Hello, my name is Liz Folder-Branch, and I am a former educator as a special educator for Portland Public Schools. I now work with a group called PlayWorks Northwest, and they believe that kids should be able to play every day. Basically, I'm helping them expand their program throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington at this time.
Hi, I'm Deb Mrazek. I was a strategic planner and did work in design strategy and innovation at HP for 27 years, and now I do consulting in the same area, and I'm an Encore Fellow with Social Venture Partner, bringing innovation and design thinking into how Social Venture Partners approaches their projects.
Thank you so much, and I'm so glad that you talked about design thinking and innovation and the importance of it in your remarks, because I wanted to comment on that before moving into the Q&A with the panel today. There's a lot of innovation that's going on in longevity and life extension. Some of you have read probably about Google and AbbVie's project called Calico, which is involving an enormous investment in extending lives. The founder of the X Prize has co-founded with Craig Venter, the person who has been such an innovator around the human genome, something called human longevity. Down near where I live in Silicon Valley, there's now $1 million Palo Alto Longevity Prize for the person who can figure out how to live longer. And we've already made huge progress in this area. Life expectancy at the beginning of the 20th century was 47 in America. Today, it's pushing 80 in this country and far beyond that in some other parts of the world. But where's the social innovation, the creativity around living better lives that could rival the investment and the good thinking that's going on into living longer and healthier lives? A generation ago, when we came up with the idea of the golden years retirement, we were spectacularly innovative. We concocted senior centers and retirement communities and elder hostel, on and on and on, and we really made what was then the leftover years into a real destination for people. And now that we're living longer and longer, how can we do that around lives that are characterized by deep engagement? And Portland and Oregon are already doing so much. There's a phrase in the aging world, naturally occurring retirement communities. I feel like this city and this state are sort of naturally occurring engagement zones. I first came to Portland almost 20 years ago to visit the foster grandparent program, and I met a woman named Cherry Hendricks who just died a couple years ago at the age of 100. She was working one-on-one, helping low-income kids, mentoring them, and she felt, though, that was a little too formal a role. And she was an avid bowler at interstate lanes in Portland, and she decided to break the rules and to create a bowling league for these kids. And I remember telling me that she handwrote 43 permission slips for these kids and essentially started an after-school program, got the alley to donate the shoes. And that kind of innovation is characterized by so many Oregonians. We at Encore give out something every year called the Purpose Prize, which is for social entrepreneurs over 60. And year in and year out, winners like Duncan Campbell, the founder of Friends of the Children, end up winning the prize. And we always wonder why so many people from Oregon. And then when you look at the panel today and you see the kind of creativity that's happening here through the Encore Fellows program work, through Bridge Meadows' remarkable efforts, through Intel's work in the state, also around the Encore Fellows program, through groups like SAGE, started by Ward Green to build better ties between young and old. I feel like what we're watching here in this city and in this state is a model for the future of this country and for the future of other parts of the world as well. Japan, South Korea, Germany, Italy, Spain, by mid-century will have between 40 and 50% of the population over 60. So this is not a subtle shift. This is truly the longevity revolution. This year we had a White House Conference on Aging, and at the very first White House Conference on Aging in the beginning, the 1960s, around that time, JFK gave his most important speech on aging, and he said we'd added years to life. Little did he know. Now it was time to add life to those years. We need to do that for all of us boomers who are coming up against this stage, but half the children born in the developed world since 2000 are projected to see their 100th birthday. So this is a critically important task for those of us who've got some gray hair today, but for all of those younger generations coming quickly on our heels. And so with that, I'd like to start the Q&A because I think there's so much expertise on the part of the panel about how we do develop the kind of creativity and new institutional and policy developments that could make the most of one of the biggest transformations of the 21st century. So I'll start, and since you're all deeply involved in this work and are leaders nationwide, how did it happen? Was it an epiphany? I met a woman who his daughter had been in Teach for America. She was near 60, and she saw her daughter teaching in front of an LA classroom and decided, I wanted to do that. So she joined TFA, they let her in, and she found herself in a dorm room in Houston in 116-degree heat, sharing a bathroom down the hall and living with three 22-year-olds. I mean, did you have an epiphany in 116-degree heat, or was this a gradual journey? Maybe I'll start with you, Ken, because you're living the dream.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Ken Harris, and I'm a native of Portland, Oregon. And for me, it was an epiphany, but it was really the pressure and constant persistence from my wife, Deborah, who said, this is something that you need to get involved in because it means so much to the community to get involved and do some things in the not-for-profit and social purpose sector. And I think one of the reasons she was pushing me in that direction was because I was semi-retired. Number two, most of the work that I've been engaged in as an attorney, running a small venture capital firm out of Washington, D.C., but it was a not-for-profit venture capital firm. So most of my activities have been in the economic, not-for-profit arena, and I enjoyed it. You know, I always get questions about, well, why are you continuing to get involved in this when you could do so many other things to make a lot more money? But that was where my passion was. And when I had an opportunity to meet with Steve and get some information and knowledge about the Encore Fellow Program, I was fortunate enough to be selected, and even more fortunate enough to be able to work with a wonderful group of 4 dynamic women who started Kairos PDX, a publicly chartered charter school here in Oregon and Northeast that's just 2 years old. And it was just a wonderful experience to go there and see these African American and Hispanic and other kids who needed nourishment educationally, and see how they focused on trying to close the educational gap in Portland, Oregon. And as you know, over 50% of the people, young kids in Portland who are African American and minority, don't graduate from high school. So their mission is significant, and I felt like if there's something that I could do to contribute, I thought it would be worthwhile to do. So I'm passionately involved in what Kairos is doing, and I think it's an excellent opportunity for me to give something back because I viewed it as a startup business. And having funded a number of startup businesses, I felt like there were several things that I could focus on to bring some value, which would be helping them establish a strong financial management and reporting system. And we just came out with a very clean audit in the first year of operations. And now we want to begin to focus on raising capital, and so they can really achieve their dream, because they go through just 0 to 2 and 0 to the second grade, but the long-term goal is go to the 5th grade. So if I can bring some value and benefit from the experiences that I've had in funding over 100 businesses and seeing the problems that startup businesses have, and being able to have some impact in my community where I was born and raised, it makes me feel good, like I'm contributing and doing something worthwhile in my latter stages of life.
Well, you know, it raises a question. Ken, you've had so much success. You've been a lawyer, an entrepreneur. Is this phenomenon just for the elite? I talked earlier about Bill Gates and Mayor Bloomberg and Jimmy Carter. Let me ask Rick about that. What about the folks that come from Intel? Are they all managers and senior professionals, or do they come from different ranks?
Yeah, thanks. You know, coming from Intel, of course, you have a lot of corporate people, you know, VPs, GMs, and in that hierarchy. But when we started the Encore program, it really became important that we also had all of our employees be able to participate, you know, in the Encore program and have that opportunity to give back after their retirement. You know, once they finish their career at Intel and starting a new career or a new opportunity to, you know, do some better things in the community. So we did actually open this up, and as you know, a large population here in Oregon is in our manufacturing community. So we have a lot of manufacturing technicians. There's 26,000 people in Intel Oregon, and again, about 12% of those are retirement eligible, and majority of those are in the manufacturing technician world. And so we actually are able to provide opportunities with our partnership with Encore for all demographics, regardless of what type of work. And the wonderful thing about it is everybody has valuable skills that they can give back to the community and provide those skills into the community with an Encore fellowship.
Could you give me an example? Tell me about two Intel retirees, one from a more professional background and one from the shop floor, and how they're working within the context of the nonprofit sector.
You bet. You know, one of my favorite stories at Intel is the system analyst. And he was an IT guy, just on the ground IT system analyst, and he was on the floor writing code. And he just wanted to, you know, once he decided that he wanted to retire, he went to partner with, you know, the Encore representative, the program operator, and they kept trying to go back and forth and try to find that right fit for them. And she would, you know, look at some IT opportunities, and he finally came back and said, I just don't want to do that anymore. I want to do something different. So she probed a little more and said, boy, what's your passion? And he said, music. I actually have a music degree, and I want to do something with that music degree. And sure enough, what did she do? She placed him in an underprivileged nonprofit for underprivileged children to have them teach choir, teach musical instruments, and basically was a choir director for those underprivileged children. But in addition, he was also able to use his IT skills to translate their hard copy music sheets into an automated system as well. So talk about taking those two skills in very different ways and apply that into an Encore fellowship. The other one that was really important too is we had a senior level person where the United Way was really struggling with their strategic development in terms of their next year plan, and they just didn't have a person that could help them get to that next level in terms of what is their strategic operation. So how are they going to take their financial budget? How are they going to take those United Way programs and take those initiatives into a 1-year, 2-year, 5-year plan? They didn't have that. Unfortunately, with Intel, we have a lot of strategic program managers and general managers, and that's what we do in terms of design. Now, when you look at design in terms of what we're going to design at Intel, of course, that's very different. But to be able to take that skill and capability and have a representation, you know, to go to the United Way, a very large organization, help them create their own design and successful plan, it really had a major impact with the United Way strategy going forward.
Thank you so much. And just as a reminder, the panel today includes Ken Harris, a lawyer, a business entrepreneur who's working at Kairos PDX, which includes a charter school working to improve the prospects for younger generations. Rick Henderson, a manager at Intel, who's led their groundbreaking effort around the Encore Fellowships program. I believe 200 Intel or more employees have been Encore Fellows, and Dorinda Schubert, who's a licensed psychologist and who's the executive director of Bridge Meadows, the winner of the prestigious Eisner Prize last year for the most remarkable intergenerational program in the country, given out by former Disney CEO Michael Eisner. And what I love about Bridge Meadows, I have to confess, I went there, I saw Bridge Meadows, and I wanted to sign up and move in. I think it turns this notion of a living environment for older people that's age segregated, one where we oftentimes hear about people in age-segregated retirement communities voting down school bond issues, and this long gray wave of purportedly greedy geezers. Well, at Bridge Meadows, it's exactly the opposite. It's an intentional, multi-generational community. And could you tell us a little bit about Bridge Meadows, but also to pick up on what Ken was saying and Rick as well, what role do the older people at Bridge Meadows play, and how does it relate to their previous experience?
Thank you, Mark, for being such a Bridge Meadows groupie. We appreciate that. Well, what happens at Bridge Meadows, it's an intentional community. People are living there with purpose and meaning. It's not only just beautiful housing, but it's a healthy wonderful intergenerational way to live. And what happens there is our elders, we call them the secret sauce. And to be an elder at Bridge Meadows, you need to be 55 or older. And every day, our team notes how we get closer and closer to that elder level. And what happens is our elders give back in the most beautiful ways. When they come to Bridge Meadows, we say, what brings you joy? What's your passion, like Rick was saying? What makes you happy? And they then identify, well, I love to teach art. I love to read to kids. I really love to babysit kids. I love to help kids with their homework. You know, I really like organizing things. And so we identify that with them, and they are then provided opportunities to make that happen. So the elders who live at Bridge Meadows donate 100 hours or contribute 100 hours a quarter of their time to making the community run well. So we have elders who are helping kids with their homework, and so now we see the children are at their academic levels or achieving beyond to their potential, because all the children that live at Bridge Meadows are being adopted by families. So it's families adopting children from the foster care system and our elders. And they're surrounding those kids with a whole bunch of love and support and the fabric of a community, so they're no longer alone. But what ends up happening is it's quite reciprocal, because the elders get so much out of it as well. We're watching their health improve. We're watching them live longer, aging in place, as we hear people would like to age in place. And we're watching them build bonds and open their mind and accept diversity in such a way that they had never before, because they're now tutoring or babysitting with people who are very different from themselves. And they probably never thought that they would be hanging out with people so very different from themselves. And so what we see now at Bridge Meadows, we've been open for 4.5 years, and you are all welcome to come tour and visit and fall in love with Bridge Meadows as well, like Mark has. And you can see right then and there how the community now is integrated with one another, and it's 3 generations supporting one another. It's not the elders are in one part of the property, and the families and the kids are another property. It's very integrated. And every Wednesday at 4:30, we have something called Happiness Hour, and all 3 generations come together and share a meal, spend some time together, and you can't really tell who the children belong to, because they're just mingling among the elders, and the families are really deeply connected. And some of them have built bonds that are very much like an extended family, and others are friendly neighbors.
Thank you. And just as a reminder for those of you who are just tuning in on OPB, I'm Marc Freedman here at the City Club, and I'm joined by Ken Harris, Dorinda Schubert, and Rick Henderson, and this is the City Club's Friday Forum. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot now, and I'm going to ask you a question that I perpetually fail to answer. And I'll start with a story. I feel like there's a confusing period opening up between midlife and anything representing senior citizenship. And it's in some ways reminiscent of adolescence. You know, 100 years ago, we had all these young people who weren't children, they weren't adults, we didn't know what to do with them, and we invented this new life stage called adolescence. We gave it a name, we concocted high schools and child labor laws. Well, now I think a parallel phenomenon is happening at this juncture, which I'm joining myself now, and like maybe many others in the audience today, but we don't even have a name for it. I remember coming up to Portland right after I turned 50. Couldn't make it all the way up here from the Bay Area, so I had to stop at a motel in Medford, and for the first time ever, I got my senior citizen discount. I saved about $4 at the Homewood Suites. And when I made this reservation, I had to call back a few minutes later to ask for 2 cribs in the room, because I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time. And I thought, you know, when I showed up, I was going to be accosted by Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. and the entire cast of the FBI for this. But I joined the oxymoronic years, the young old, the working retired. We don't really know what to call this period. And when I asked my mother-in-law about it, she told me that she was on her next to last dog. So we're used to the dog years. What would you call this period? I'll start with you, Ken, because you kind of ended with a whimsical line about what period you're in. When people ask you, do you say you're retired? Do you say you're a senior citizen? What do you say?
Well, that's a good question, Mark. It's Ken Harris, Encore Fellow. I tend not to buy into labels, and so I don't really know how I would classify that experience or that life turning event. But I too have experienced the AARP card and the senior citizen discount at the movies, and I have a 19-year-old son, so it takes a lot of courage to do that. But at any rate, I was, I tend to tell people that I'm semi-retired and doing a lot of things to enjoy life and taking life a day at a time.
Dorinda or Rick, what do your retirees tell you?
One of the things that Intel retirees tell me is they're not going to retire. They're basically, what they want to do is they want to start a second career. They've had a corporate career, and now they want to go ahead and start another career. And a lot of that is with that Encore career, and it really is creating a new legacy. And it generally, again, I mean, a lot of these people, we've been doing this program for 5 years now. Many of them have continued on for those 5 years. Our first original Encore folks staying on with the nonprofit organizations after their Encore program. So it really, truly is a second career for a lot of the Intel people.
This is Dorinda, and I would say the elder. We use that word elder purposefully to really represent wisdom and life experience respectfully. It's not elderly, which often has a feeling of frailty to it. It's the word elder, and it's worn with a badge of honor at Bridge Meadows, because what we're saying to our elders is we trust that you have some incredible life experience and wisdom that'll be helpful to us. Now, there are days they say things that bring us great laughter, like, really, you said that? But for the most part, their life experience, they're able to tell the parents, it'll be okay. He'll be okay. Been there, done that. It's going to be okay. Because I've been there. I had that happen. What a true gift for a mom who has instantly become a parent to 3 children who've experienced the foster care system. Not infants, children who are in elementary school. That's a daunting task. And to have a few elders who've been around for a while, who have parented many children, who've experienced life's journey, to say it's going to be okay is a true gift. So I would say the elder years.
That's great. Your tales remind me of an encounter a few years ago. I met a guy who'd been ousted from a media job at the age of 60. They sent him to an executive transition group, and he met a couple of others who were in the same position, and they formed a breakfast club, and they gave themselves a name, he told me, the Pips, the Pip Squad. And what, the Pips? I've heard of Gladys Knight. He said, previously important persons. And he said that they had also adopted a mantra, and it's the world may be done with us, it's just we're not done with the world. And it sounds like that characterizes a lot of you as well. The guy who invented adolescence, G. Stanley Hall, who founded the American Psychological Association, 20 years later said, I made a big mistake. I should have never invented teenagers. I should have invented a new period between midlife and old age. And he was kind of a poet, and he described the period as an Indian summer. And he said that human beings didn't reach the height of their capacities until the shadows started slanting eastward. And I think he was trying to talk about that special sauce that Dorinda mentioned, that Rick talked about, the legacy issue. What do you think is unique about this particular position that the Intel retirees are reaching? I think you said maybe 58 is the age. And then I'm going to ask the other panelists about, we know some things diminish with age, but some things seem to grow as well. What have you learned, Rick?
Well, what I've really learned is a lot of these people, I have more gray hair than they do, and they're so young and vibrant, and that's what I've really learned about it. As you said, Mark, these people, the employees at Intel, average age is 58. We've had people that are retirement eligible in their 40s and early 50s, so it's not uncommon. I think we've always think about retirement as in the 60s and 70s, and it really is a much longer generation with a lot more longevity in terms of continuing a career. And I think the impact to me is truly that is the interest. When you look at when people leave a corporation or their job is impacted, or their skills are declining, they're getting burnt out after 25 years at a corporation, a lot of times the corporation will pay them a severance package, or they'll give them money to go on, or maybe they'll even give them a retirement benefit or plan. But when we did the surveys and we looked at, asked Intel employees what is it that they want to do, it truly was to continue work in some kind of capacity. And a lot of them definitely wanted to continue some of the volunteer work that they did at Intel, from Intel, and really reach out to the community. So it was an overwhelming realization from our standpoint to say, yeah, that's actually what they really want more than anything, is another career, new opportunities to stay engaged, to stay active, and then kind of still gradually work with the medical benefits and medical things that they really had concerns about. But that was really the main thing. And I thought that was one of the things that's such a wonderful opportunity for us at Intel to be able to continue to help that legacy.
How about you, Ken? Tell me a little bit about, you're at this juncture. How would you characterize the special sauce?
Well, for me, it's a continuing passion. And while, I can't do the 12, 14-hour days, I spend a lot of time even beyond the normal work day that I'm supposed to be involved in, because the special sauce for me is seeing the energy level of the kids, the energy level of other volunteers, some of whom are in the audience, and Janice, for example, who puts a lot of time into Kairos. And everybody is so excited about the mission and the potential impact that you get so consumed by it that, you really don't concern yourself with, the limitations. And, so I found myself being highly energized and, much more highly energized after being involved with Kairos than I was prior to that. So I may have been slowing down a little bit before that, but this has really reinvigorated my energy level, my spirit, my passion. And so I feel as if I can continue to do this for 2 or 3 or 4 more years.
What are your people telling you, Dorinda?
Well, at Bridge Meadows, what we see is the elders really feeling like they're needed and that they belong and they're not invisible. I had an elder who is very active and artistic and said to me, I no longer feel invisible. And I would never have thought she felt invisible just by the way she lives her life at Bridge Meadows. But having that reason to get up every morning and knowing you have to be at the school to pick up Joey from school and bring him home, you really you're needed. You're important and you're needed, and you're no longer pushed off to the side and not needed. So I think I'd change their names to currently important people instead of previously important people. But what we're watching is, as they are living these lives where they're living with purpose, they're leaving this legacy, and they're watching it happen right before their very eyes as the children's grades are improving and they're healing from their trauma, and these elders know that they had a positive impact on that child's life, and they're going to leave this beautiful legacy.
You talked about the Bridge Meadows elders feeling needed, but I think a lot of people at this stage of life don't feel that way. At what I hear from people oftentimes is that, this sounds great. I want to have a purpose in my life. I know it's good for me, and they're right about that. There's a psychiatrist at Harvard Medical School, George Valent, who's studied people who are involved with younger generations, who have this purpose that helps leave a legacy, and found that they're 3 times as happy as those who fail to engage in that way. And he has a beautiful line. He says, biology flows downhill. We're set up as human beings to do what the Encore Fellows are doing, what the elders at Bridge Meadows are doing, and yet as a society, we're not necessarily flowing downhill. Ageism seems to be a big issue in a lot of people that I hear. How do we get rid of ageism in this society so that all these people who are needed are not shoved to the sidelines or turned away? I'll start with Rick on that.
Yeah, I think, especially in the corporate world, that's a real challenge, because you get into that situation where you're afraid to retire. You're afraid to have this image of non-importance when you get into that older, and that you feel less valued in the corporate world, even at 25, 30 years, maybe even feel less productive, but yet you still hold on to stay at that corporation because that's your identity. And I think a lot of people in society, you struggle because once they leave the company, what do they do now? What's their purpose? What's their value? And they don't know anymore. And I think we also sometimes forget that these people, there is so much more value that they can provide and much more value that they can, achieve just outside of that company, and again, repurpose themselves and create a different image for themselves as they move forward. And I think more education and more communication and more support, during that later career, the first career in the corporate world, and being able to integrate that and transition that over and give them that sense of, hey, there is value, there is purpose when you move into that next step. And again, moving into things like an Encore career can help, achieve that purpose.
Before I turn to Ken and ask him that very same question, I just want to remind people who've just tuned in to OPB that I'm Marc Freedman here with Ken Harris, Dorinda Schubert, and Rick Henderson at City Club of Portland's Friday Forum.
Ken Harris, Encore Fellow. Mark, that's a real interesting question, and I think it's a cultural issue and a challenge for the nation to address the mentality of aging and the problems associated with that in terms of the limitations that we put on people that are advanced in their ages. I do think, too, that beyond just education, the fact that you have so many people entering into that phase of life, and you have programs like Encore, where people can see as a living example people engaged in significant, important activities, can help bring some of those barriers down. But I think that's a real medium-term challenge. I think it's a mental challenge, it's a cultural challenge, and that's one of the things that I think it will need to be addressed in this country.
Dorinda, what about at Bridge Meadows? Do you ever find that some of the adoptive families there say, why are all these old people here? Do you or are people embraced from the moment they walk in the door?
Well, certainly there's, Bridge Meadows is a microcosm of the world, frankly. There's some days you love your neighbor and sometimes they're annoying you to death. So I don't want anyone to think that it's utopia, but it's certainly close. Because people are figuring out how to live well together. And I think that when you bring the generations together, that's probably one of the best ways to start reducing ageism, because then you're seeing the value of each other and what you bring to the world. And because now we've got all these children who have had continuous exposure to elders and watching their value and personally experiencing the value of having an elder in their life, so that as they grow older, they're going to take that into their life and not be afraid of an older person or want to actually engage an older person because they know the wealth of knowledge and wisdom and love and care that can exist there. So yes, there are days where I'm sure, just like all of us, our own elders drive us nuts. I'm sure that there are days when the parents at Bridge Meadows say, okay, let's just close the blinds for today. But in most part, they truly treasure and are grateful, and I think that all the parents have all said, I couldn't do this without the elders.
Well, I put the panelists on the spot earlier and asked them to come up with entirely new language, having failed for 20 years to do so myself, so I'm going to do it yet again and raise the stakes. I think we all agree that there's an incredible opportunity to be seized along with the challenges of an aging society. Is there any one thing that you could imagine that a policymaker, that a corporate leader, that the social sector could do to realize this experience dividend? Anything that gives you a great deal of excitement?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. From an Intel perspective, I think, and just in a corporate world, I'm excited about looking at the growing retirement population and seeing a shift in the corporate sector where they are really viewing and accepting the fact that We have so many great retirement eligible employees, that we have this aging population that still has this value, that they can give back to new hires, new college graduates, people that they can mentor while they're transitioning out, that they can go ahead and move forward into the community. I'm seeing a real impact. I've been receiving many calls from other corporations hoping to, model what Intel has been starting, and I'm really excited to see especially that other corporate worlds are really, really starting to embrace this potential dilemma where, again, giving purpose back and supporting that purpose to go beyond and start that second career. So very excited in that space.
Great, thank you. We'll just go in order. Dorenda?
Well, I think that if the funding right now, the public funding for services is very siloed. It's the elder funding, the senior funding, the children funding, the housing funding, the health funding, and having ways to braid some of that funding together really would address these issues about ageism and building more robust funding. And then bringing in the private sector to cooperate and to build public-private partnerships, I think would be really helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Ken Harris, Encore Fellow. I think you have to address that on two fronts. Number one, ageism has to become a policy priority, and that means that it becomes a political issue. And you have organizations like AARP and others that I think can bring bear to the significance of that issue, because you're looking at a humongous resource of skilled talent that, if not untapped, it becomes wasteful, and it becomes so productive to some of the needs that we have in our country. Number two, I think the private sector is critical to be able to duplicate programs like Encore through Intel, and I think it's an educational process to get corporate America aware of these kinds of programs to be able to take advantage of it. And so that becomes an educational challenge to get Encore Fellow type programs out there in the private sector. And I think that the receptivity and success that they've had at Intel can be duplicated by a number of different corporations across the country.
That's a great capstone to the discussion. I'd like to thank our three panelists for these wonderful and astute remarks. And we're now going to open up the Q&A portion of the program. If you've written a question on an index card, please hold it up high so the City Club staff can collect it from you. We'll now take questions from the audience. As always, we invite members to the microphone to ask their question. Asking questions at the Friday Forum microphone is a benefit of City Club membership, and membership is open to everyone. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. Also, I'll read at least one index card question at the end. And I also want to make sure and directly invite the panelists to join in the fray. So we'll take our first question.
Hi, Mark and panelists. I'm Joyce DeMonin with City Club member. And thank you so much for this really engaging conversation. I was just wondering if you could address the economic value that older adults bring to the economy, especially as we've talked about the transition out of the corporate world, but as they are innovators and starters of their own businesses, the entrepreneurship area.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. You talked about, Joyce, thank you for that question about the entrepreneurship question. And, we tend to think of innovation and experience as being inimical. But it turns out that older people are the most entrepreneurial of any group in society. The Kauffman Foundation, year in and year out, produces research on different age groups, and the 55 to 64 group in particular ends up being the most entrepreneurial, and so I really appreciate. We've seen that at Encore. We give out, as I mentioned earlier, something called the Purpose Prize for social entrepreneurs over 60. It's the 10th anniversary this year. We worried whether we'd have enough people to give out 5 prizes a year. We've had 10,000 nominations. So I think it's just a glimpse of what you were talking about. Any of the panelists want to jump in on the question of the economic value of older people?
Well, at Bridge Meadows, what we see is the elders are providing a significant amount of childcare so that the parents can go to work. And so they're saving these dear parents a lot of money that can go back into supporting the children. So that's the economic value we've seen thus far.
Great. Let's go to our next question.
Les Volstek, City Club member. What about lifelong learning for retirees? People who maybe even want to get a degree or want to take non-credit courses, or those of us who are self-didacts, those people who want to learn a foreign language and travel. What about lifelong learning?
You know, I talked earlier about the future is already here. I remember picking up a copy of Time magazine a few years ago, and there was an article about the doubling of people over 50 going to divinity school with the remarkable title of Holy Enrollers. So I thought, and that phenomenon is happening across higher education, but all too often the lead story in that Time magazine piece was about a woman who was a nurse in Florida who became an Episcopal priest. To afford the $100,000 cost, she had to sell her house and car and all of her worldly possessions, which I guess is fine if you're going into the clergy, but probably not a good model. I wish there were more opportunities for people to underwrite education later on in life. Why do we load up all of our higher education resources at the beginning of life? Shouldn't they be distributed in a way that makes more sense given the greater longevity we're experiencing? Let's go to the next question.
Ted Kay, City Club member. I toured in Hungary a couple years ago and saw a very interesting innovation. In a small village of 2,000, the local public school not only prepared lunches for all the children every day, but also for the local seniors who walked to the school and ate lunch with the kids. It was a great combination of ages and use of the capital assets of the community. And I'd like to ask each of the panelists if they know of other similar kinds of innovations that we might do in our society to connect the older and the younger and do so in innovative ways.
It's a great question. This is Rick Henderson from Intel, and one of the things that we're really excited about is the STEM initiative. One of the things I was mentioning earlier to Mark and definitely are excited about is that we are really looking to support the underprivileged children in the education and having our Encore fellows and our retirees through the Encore program to really support the public schools in the underprivileged communities and the underprivileged areas. We're so excited to really focus on that educational development to help the key learnings where they don't have that type of support in the math and science and the other educations. And so there's really a strong initiative in that space.
This is Ken Harris, Encore Fellow. I know that at Kairos PDX, they have a strong volunteer program that draws on institutions in the community, from the church to private sector businesses. And it's an amazing thing to see one-on-one reading that is going on with each of the kids, because reading is so vital at that young age. And it's institutionalized within KDPX. They do it at least once or twice a week. The program has grown in number, and the one-on-one reading has benefited the kids tremendously. And those kinds of innovative programs, I think, can be adopted throughout the city and make a huge benefit and has huge value to the young kids.
More and more intergenerational programs are popping up around the country. Daycare centers connecting with assisted living centers, sometimes being daycare centers being actually housed in an assisted living center. More programs where elders are coming and being involved in the schools, like Ken is talking about. And definitely much more interest in creating intentional intergenerational communities. We receive requests many times a month for how did you do this and how can I do this in my community? So much so we're expanding to Beaverton. So it seems as though this idea of not segregating the generations and bringing them together is taking on some fire, and we're very excited about that and happy to be at the forefront of that. So I think we'll just watch more and more happen, and I love this idea about in Hungary. So thank you for sharing it.
You know, I'll just interject that I recently read a breathtaking new policy initiative in Singapore, where the country is putting billions of dollars into preparing for the opportunity of the aging society, and it's very commonsensical. And one of the 10 precepts of their plan is co-locating senior centers and child care facilities, which is such a simple idea, but as you know, the panelists were saying, something that would benefit all involved. I'm going to, since we have this strong theme of intergenerational connection, collaboration, let me read a challenging question, which is an important one. Since seniors have a lower poverty rate than younger adults, is it right for them to get senior discounts for various goods and services? Okay, I'm going to refund that $4 from the Homewood Suites, but I'm curious what the panelists think about that. Are senior discounts immoral? Have any of you ever taken one?
Well, I must Ken Harris, Encore fellow. I must confess that I have taken advantage of that. Actually, I think it's a benefit because it's a recognition, you know, that senior citizen people are valuable to the community and to businesses, and I think that outweighs any economic sacrifice that may come with that.
This is Dorinda, and I have not yet taken advantage of a discount, but I'm with Ken. I think their income, the elders' income, does not increase at all. It actually decreases, and I support the discount.
I did get my first Jelly Belly pack from the Jelly Belly store, being over 50. It was on a Tuesday, so that was my first discount support. But I think it's important. I think, you know, there's such a longevity in the hard work that I think people go through in their lives, and I think there should be some type of reward for that. And I think it's a benefit, just like we receive other benefits when we retire. I think it's another benefit from a society standpoint that aging population should have.
You know, just on the subject of senior discounts, there's a really intriguing project happening here in the Northwest on Bainbridge Island, being created by David Harrison, who's a public policy professor at the Evans School at University of Washington. And it's he's developing a point-of-sale card where seniors can transfer their discount to nonprofits if they choose to. And so, you know, maybe that's the solution to the question. We're nearing the end of the program. We only have a couple minutes, but I'd like to take one last question from the audience.
I want to follow up on that because there are a lot of seniors who are retiring that don't have the income that we probably have in this room. And ageism is an issue for those seniors who need to keep working, who can't, who may be entrepreneurial but don't have the skills. So how are you addressing that issue? The economic issue of folks that don't have the wherewithal we do?
That's a great question to close on because I think, you know, as the panelists were saying, there are enormous multiple benefits of people continuing to contribute longer. I use that phrase, passion, purpose, and a paycheck, but how do we make sure that that's widely available, not just to people who are well-educated and have big pensions, but also people who need to work particularly. And I think that's where public policy that doesn't yet exist could play a tremendously important role. Why not have a second bite of the apple, a second chance to move up the ladder at this juncture in life?
We would run out of broadcast time, and we'll have to stop now. Please have wonderful holidays these next 2 weeks. And if you're still deciding your charitable year-end contributions, please consider the City Club's annual fund. You can access it by visiting our website, pdxcityclub.org. This is Greg McPherson, President of City Club. Please join me in thanking our guests and Ed Hershey of the Friday Forum Committee who produced today's program. We are adjourned.